And joining me now is NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel in Tel Aviv. It's still in the early hours of the morning there. Obviously, the big question today on everyone's mind, the president calling it a spectacular success. The immediate question on everyone's mind is, A, how severe is the damage? Will it set Iran's nuclear program definitively back? And B, where does Iran go from here? If you can shed light on what Israel is bracing itself for today.
So the Israelis, on a very short-term basis, are concerned about a reprisal. The Home Front Command, which issues guidance and doesn't change its guidance that often, it has been giving a guidance here to remain vigilant up until now, has upped its level of alert, telling people that they should not attend any public gatherings, no sporting events, no school, no work gatherings, only essential work. So they are on a heightened state of alert, a semi-lockdown, if you will. They had already been, under attack with Iranian ballistic missiles coming down at Israel every single day for the last week or so. So this country was already on high alert. They're bracing for some sort of response. But the Israeli reaction, official reaction, has been absolutely to welcome this. You have Prime Minister Netanyahu echoing President Trump's statements. They are clearly working hand in glove. This is something that Israel has long wanted. On the street, right now the streets are quite quiet, but on the street when we talk to people, they are generally supportive of this military operation. It was seen as a better now than later philosophy that they were going to engage with Iran at some stage, that it was better to do it now before having a nuclear weapon. That's the view as it was seen from here. But there are countries in the region who might not be vocally expressing their concerns, who I'm hearing from privately, who are very worried that Israel and the United States now seem to have a feeling of unchecked power and that they don't know where this is going, that this was Prime Minister Netanyahu's goal, that he found President Trump relatively easily manipulated, and that he was going to do this and finally got the United States on board.
And of course, the window now opens itself to a possible Iranian retaliation. If you hear what the president said today, or see what he said today in the social media post, he suggested that any Iranian retaliation would be met with a greater force. Some see this right now as an opening, that if Iran does retaliate against America, certainly in the region, it would open the door for even more American involvement, potentially leading ultimately to regime change, something that the Israeli prime minister has agitated for, has certainly called for in the past. One senior official I've spoken to from the region said this could be the beginning of the end for the Islamic regime in Iran, depending on what they do next. Where do you see this going from a kind of big picture approach, not just in the short term? I mean, Iran is now cornered. If they do retaliate, they run the risk of going into a direct war with the United States, which wouldn't be very long for them. They wouldn't last very long. Or if they do nothing, they appear very weakened in the eyes of their own people and ultimately susceptible to collapse.
No doubt, Iran has been put into a corner. They were engaged in negotiations. President Trump is framing this as we're using force in order to convince the Iranians to come back to the negotiating table, to think again. They thought they could keep their nuclear enrichment program. Well, now they don't have a nuclear enrichment program, so they better come back to the table now. But the Iranians believe that the negotiating table was all a trick, that they were lured into this process under false pretenses, that Netanyahu and Trump were always going to do this, that President Trump just recently said that they have 2 more weeks to negotiate, and barely a day went by before the bombs started dropping on those nuclear sites today. So Iran, there's no trust. There never had been trust, but Iran feels, and I was just in Iran, and officials there have been saying this publicly, that they believe that this process was only designed to get them to put their guard down and allow them to be attacked. Now, can they go back to negotiations? The ones they believe are fictitious and set up to make them fail? What choice do they have? Because if they engage directly with the U.S. military, even more so, then they could face a total annihilation of their military capacity, including their capacity to maintain control over law and order at home. There have been some attacks on Iranian police stations. The internet is out in Iran right now because the government is so afraid of infiltration, that there are Israeli spies, so they're trying to limit communications. The Iranian government is at a very fragile state right now, and when you have cornered a state, and Iran is cornered, that is, President Trump is hoping that is what makes them more malleable, but it also could make them much more dangerous.
You know, I know that you had spoken to Ali Shamkhani, the top Iranian negotiator, a couple of weeks ago, certainly before the Israeli war began on Iran. He was rumored to have been dead. He certainly turned out to be alive, according to Iranian state media. But since you are one of the last Western journalists to have spoken to him, do you get a sense now that, you know, with Iran cornered, it may have to negotiate if it wants to keep the regime in place, if it wants the regime to survive? That's what they're going to be negotiating about, while you have Israel perhaps wanting to continue this operation to decapitate the regime once and for all?
Well, I think that's exactly what what's on the table here. Before they were negotiating about their nuclear program, they were negotiating whether they would continue to have the right to enrich uranium at some capacity. And I did speak with Ali Shamkhani, who was one of the top advisors, military, nuclear, and political advisor to the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei of Iran, one of the key people in the country who is authorized to speak definitively about what Iran would and would not accept in negotiations. And he laid out what Iran's expectations are. He said they wanted to keep enriching uranium to a low level, that they would be willing to get rid of their more highly enriched uranium, those sites that were attacked today. Iran said they were going to get rid of it anyway in an agreement, that they were willing to do that. Russia had proposed to potentially be a mediator in that process. They wanted a lifting of sanctions, and they also promised to allow in inspectors to oversee the entire process. And President Trump responded to that comment from Shamkhani and said, looks like we're close to a deal. So for a while, it looked like the two sides were very close to a deal, but then suddenly the goalposts got further. And suddenly Iran was not cooperating. And suddenly it was close to a nuclear weapon. And suddenly it was very close. And suddenly the U.S. intelligence assessment under Tulsi Gabbard changed. And the Iranians believe that they were duped into all of this. So now they're not negotiating. If they do go back to negotiations, I think they have no choice. They're not negotiating about their nuclear program. They're now negotiating about the regime's survival.
All right, with me now, Richard Engel. Thank you so much for that. Greatly appreciated.